Hello and welcome back around the bonfire. It's the show that might have been wrong about Mauricio Pochettino. It's John and Tim back. Exciting news. Tim, I'll get to you later. First and foremost, we are welcoming another guest from advancing from unofficial friend of the pod to official friend of the pod. Tom Bogert joining us today. Tom Bogert of The Athletic and SoccerWise, if for whatever reason you don't know who he is. Tom, thanks for being here, man. An exciting day for a lot of reasons, I think. But
exciting day for me. I just got promoted from acquaintance to friend to the show. I'm very happy about it.
It's a big moment. Don't screw it up. We don't do these lightly. You're in rarefied air in some ways. We have World Cup winners. We have MLS MVPs. Like it's a big deal, actually.
Yeah.
And then
there's me and you at the other end of that scale. Yeah.
And then there's the guys who actually do it, right? That's rarefied air. No, it's good to be back. Been a little bit since we were here kind of enjoying some of the MLS break, but obviously some massive news today, that being Joel Waterman's Canada side moving on into the round of 16. Massive. Small note, reportedly, Robert Lewandowski has agreed to terms on a 2-year contract with Chicago Fire. Tom, you confirmed the news this morning. Feels like an easy place to start of quick reactions of kind of how everybody's feeling at a 30,000 feet level.
Yeah, this is a very, very big signing. It goes without saying. Off the field, I guess I'll start with that. I love the connection between Chicago and the Polish community and what Robert Lewandowski will bring there. He is walking into the league, the third biggest name player in the league now, behind Messi and Son Heung-min. This is a gigantic signing for a player that I think is aging very well, and I think is going to continue to age extremely well in MLS. On the field, which is more important, he joins a team where, for Greg Berhalter, his pre-USMNT era and post-USMNT era in MLS, if one of us was playing center forward, we could luck into a few goals. His system is great for center forwards and creating chances for them. Hugo Cuypers is an awesome player within his own right. He'll score goals no matter where you put him. He's a golden boot leader when he's on this Fire team. Robert Lewandowski is walking into a team that is much closer to a finished product than, say, what Antoine Griezmann is walking into Orlando. Aside, I think Orlando and Griezmann is a fantastic fit. I think he's going to be very successful. The difference is they signed Griezmann, now what? Because they need to do things. And no, Greg Berhalter would never say that a team is complete because that's not how he or any of these people operate. But Lewandowski's walking into a team where it's just like, oh, I see exactly where he's going to play. I see exactly how he's going to play. And this is a really good team that just got better.
Yeah, exactly. It does feel closer to, I'm not 100% sure this is the missing piece that I would have chosen, right, when you already have the Golden Boot winner in the squad. But he just clearly is going to elevate that part of the team. And, I guess the big comparison for Fire fans is when Bastian Schweinsteiger, came to the Fire. That was a wooden spoon caliber team the seasons before, and they made it to the playoffs that year, looked really good for a while, then it kind of fell apart. This is a completely different situation, so that even a fraction of the impact could be enough to get hardware for the Fire. And he's a much better player, frankly, than Schweinsteiger was in terms of just absolute top of his position in the world, really, for the past decade or so.
He's literally at worst top 3 center forward of his generation. That's just kind of off the top of my head. I'd probably say best than him and Luis Suarez, I guess, right? Harry Kane, if you consider them the same generation. But this is the caliber of player that we're talking about, and somebody who scored a ton of goals at Barcelona over the last few years. And no, the Chicago Fire isn't Barcelona, but it showed that he's still kicking it at a high level, right? And then you talk from the Schweinsteiger one, and that's a good way to put it, right? And don't want to kick too much dirt on previous eras, but let's just say Greg Berhalter is a significantly better coach than what was in place at the time of Schweinsteiger arriving and playing for this team. So the timing is right. Everything is extremely exciting. He's literally the only question you can have is, can he play with Cuypers? Or are you going to bend the system too much to try to fit more talent? That's it, because I have no worries about him personally in terms of his quality still at his age and fit within the team, or questions around who's going to provide service for him. The only question you can have is, okay, can him and Cuypers play together? And that's it.
Yeah, and I think that is obviously kind of maybe the elephant in the room. Like I asked Hugo about it as far back as January when the rumors first kind of kicked up again. And at the time, he just said he wasn't worried about it, which is what you have to say as a professional player. But like, it's clearly been something that has been on his mind and the team's mind, which is how, like, you know, in terms of like caliber of striker that Lewandowski is. Like a fun fact that Greg is going to say at least once and probably more like 3 times whenever they do an introductory presser is that no one has scored more goals in the top level than Robert Lewandowski in the past 15 years, which is like, obviously, if you haven't been playing 15 years, you're not going to be really in the contention of that. So that knocks a lot of the guys out of the running, but it does go to show what they think of the guy. But Hugo Cuypers is like, it's so strange to be signing a striker when you've got a golden boot leader on your squad.
I think that speaks more to, and like I don't want to be careful because obviously Robert Lewandowski was targeted, a long-term target. It's not as if they just, you know, put up, you know, the Toronto FC. Let's just search on transfer market who's a high-profile player coming out of contract. But I kind of think it's clear that they wanted a high-profile star. I know that is something. And, like, again, they didn't just sign Lewandowski because of his name. Like, I want to be abundantly clear about that. But it's not a coincidence, right? Like, Tim, to your point, like, when they had talks for Neymar or they had, you know, a little bit of talks for Salah before he re-signed with Liverpool, kind of before that, you'd be like, all right, like, who's the DP coming? It's just like, well, no, this Andre Franco, we really like him. Or, like, it's like, you know, we don't really want to go older. And then kind of that shifted over the last couple years. And I think that the team, and that's why I keep coming back to kind of my first point of like, this isn't just a long shot. All right, I hope Robert fixes it all. Like, this is somebody who's going to fit within the team, and the team is ripe and ready at a point for somebody like him to come in. Like, it's not as if he's just a savior or something. He's just going to be additive.
Yeah, you mentioned. Go ahead. Sorry, John.
No, I was just going to say, I think the interesting point here, right, is like, you made the point of nobody scored, you know, more goals over the last 15 years in the top flight. I mean, you look at any record book from this century, and it's Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, and Robert Lewandowski in terms of forwards, right? You know, the interesting thing here, Tom, is as you talk about kind of like the fit, I don't think any of us think Robert Lewandowski on his own is making this team worse. I do think there's a question of, to your point, how does he play with Hugo Cuypers, and what does this mean kind of for the rest of the roster there, right? Because this is a team that hasn't exactly, what's the word I want to use, like thrived playing in a 2-forward system so far this year. Obviously, that was more Robin Lod, Marin Haile Selassie at times. And obviously, you would expect Robert Lewandowski races that level, but it's interesting, and they're still looking at more here too, right? I know, I'm sure we'll talk about some of that as it comes here, but I'm curious from both of you just how this sits, knowing this is a team that has at times struggled to score in this 4-4-2 that they've been playing, and you're getting another great goal scorer, but you're not adding anything in service necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a completely fair concern, but like, first of all, I know that there's teams that have been calling about Hugo Cuypers throughout the reporting of this Lewandowski decision, and if he was going to pick Chicago, it was like even before the decision came today, like over the last weeks, it's like, oh, particularly like when he visited, it's like, all right, like you can't kind of hide that this is like real and this is probably close. Hey, if he does come, call us. Like, we want Hugo. Like, we want Hugo. Like, there are teams that are lining up for that. So at the worst case scenario, he could be moved and it wouldn't be for nothing. It wouldn't be like a dump. But from what I've heard and what I think is going to happen is you at least try to play it for a month, right? Like, at least you try, unless that somebody blows you away with an offer. But for me, I'll always err on the side of, all right, get the talent and then figure it out. And like, again, Berhalter, I respect him immensely as a tactician. Lewandowski's intelligence, Cuypers' intelligence. If there's a way to make it work, I would like to give them the opportunity to try to make it work, because I just think it's a number of smart people and people who could fit, and maybe it won't, right? That doesn't guarantee that it'll fit perfectly, but I'd rather try.
Yeah, I mean, you're reporting, and this lines up with what I heard from some sources as well, that they're hoping that for a guy that they haven't officially signed yet, like no ink on paper as of the time we're recording, which is Sunday night, but that he will be there for July 16th, which is the Flyers' first game back. And I mean, that's a quick turnaround. You know, I think we all have concerns about visas, but they can't exactly say that this is an unknown guy, so that certainly helps. But I mean, my point about all that, it's that's 3 days. I mean, this before the World Cup final. It's 3 days after the transfer window opens, and I believe the window open to what, like the beginning of September, like September.
Correct.
Yeah. So like that
It's
gives them
a couple
time.
days after major European windows. Yeah.
Right. And so that gives them time to play them together. And then, I mean, if he's got suitors within MLS, like potentially move there, potentially, there's been a little bit of noise outside MLS. I would say that he's probably more of a MLS target just with his deal and having the option year and stuff like that on it. But
yeah, so I would like listen. He's somebody who's valuable in Europe, but like, let's just be honest. If you're Hugo Cuypers' agent, you would tell him your biggest next contract after this option is an MLS because you've proven you are one of the best center forwards in the league, and teams with money here for a DP center forward pay more than I think he was linked with Real Sociedad. Like, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Cuypers' next contract, if it's with an MLS club, will be more than even whatever Real Sociedad's offering him. And that's a pretty big size club. And really quickly, like you talk about his potential debut, Tim, yeah, as you said, their hope is to get him ready, or like the visa to be ready for that game. Physically, he'll be good. But to have his visa ready and like eligible to play, that's when the Vancouver Whitecaps and Thomas Muller come to town. So listen, Joe Mansueto, not that he needs any prodding from any of us idiots, but if ever to call in a political favor to get a visa over the line a little bit quicker than ever, I'd say it's that game. And I goddamn well hope that the government is not the reason why he can't play in that game.
well, yeah, I mean, I was there. So Son Heung-min's first. This is the other interesting comparison. His first
he got
game.
his visa so fast.
I know. It was like basically in the amount of time that he was probably in the air before the paperwork was filled out. And he showed up, and just like Chicago doesn't have anywhere near the Korean American community that Los Angeles does.
Mm-hmm.
But tickets to that game in SeatGeek, which are never easy sales, moved like hotcakes. Like it was a virtual sellout within like 24 hours of it happening. And man, that is kind of the regret, is that Son Heung-min's first game is at SeatGeek Stadium, and Robert Lewandowski doesn't get the same MLS heritage treatment that may or may not send him back on an airplane being like, yeah, I'm just going to retire. Actually, guys, sorry.
Oh, God.
Thought about it, but nah. But, I think it is going to be that kind of an impact, right? Like, just in terms of, maybe that's not the best comparison to be making on the pitch right now, but I think he did take. That's the only other example that comes to mind right now. That's a team that was already at a really high level and kind of helped make them better, rather than a big name like Miami was an absolute mess before Leo Messi shut up.
Yeah,
and like same thing we talked about Schweinsteiger. Like most of the time when these big names are coming in, it's more of like a hero to fix things, and it doesn't work a lot of the time because like a squad isn't one guy and there's deeper problems behind that.
Yeah, Son Heung-min, the only.
I'm there. Yeah, go ahead, John.
No, sorry. I was going to say the only person ever actually trying to play games at SeatGeek Stadium. Really rushing in to get it. Yeah, look, it's good points. It's good points. Look, he's a great player. I don't think anybody's doubting that. Maybe something a little more on the interesting side of things as we move toward kind of the year restarting and that window opening. There was another name thrown out, and this fits into maybe the larger conversation about what this team could look like, right? The reporting earlier, Tom, I could have been from you, and I apologize if I'm not remembering that correctly. Okay, there we go. Perfect, not offending anybody. But the Fire also in talks with German international Leon Goretzka. This would obviously, as it stands, not be a designated player deal. Fire completely full on DPs and U22s, plus adding Robert Lewandowski in some way. There is some flexibility there, but there's also no available roster slots, no international slots. I think that's something Tim and I can talk about later when we get into the nitty-gritty of the roster. There are going to be moves out. I'm curious your guys' thoughts on where it stands on the likelihood we see one more big name in.
So I'll start on this to say that, yeah, as Paul Tenorio and I first reported a few weeks ago, there was an offer made to Leon Goretzka. Those talks are ongoing. The Fire feel like the commitment from Robert Lewandowski is only going to help in their chase for Leon Goretzka. They're like, so the offer, if he does indeed sign, will be something similar to when Muller joined the Whitecaps, starts on a TAM deal, and what you're going to see whenever the hell Inter Miami announces Casemiro signing. It's going to start as a TAM deal, and then the way that currently apparently you're allowed to get around it in MLS now is that you make it a DP option, so it doesn't count on that used to not be real. And then Jordi Alba had a new contract extension that was allowed, and then Casemiro was allowed to be offered that contract, and same thing with Muller or whatever. You go on down the list. It's a new way that teams are getting around the rule, I guess, where it's not illegal, doesn't feel great. All that is to say, they don't need a DP spot to sign Leon Goretzka. International spots, I've spoken to sporting directors earlier in the year, nothing recently, so I don't know if this has changed. But earlier in the year, particularly teams that even had extra ones, were like, we might sign somebody in the summer. Or there was, I forget if it was Portland or somebody else, basically loaned an international spot. Like, you have to give us back it at, the start of the summer transfer window. And then, like, we could trade it back to you again at the end if we don't sign anybody. So international roster spots might be a little bit of a hurdle, but nothing that would ever take a deal. But they are still active in that pursuit of Leon Goretzka.
Yeah. I mean, from what I've heard is the team isn't overly concerned about the international slots being available if they need them. I know that they also have green cards in the works for some players, and the rules on exactly when that qualifies changes every year, but they basically have until... It does. Like, it has not survived like 2
Tim,
years and like years and years. That. Yeah.
I was hoping that you were going to read off the rule, because I was like, I think I remember it, but I don't know if it's
this year. So
then.
basically this year they have through when the secondary window opens for the green card to count.
Right. Opens, not closed, right?
Yes. Opens, not closed, which it used to be closed. The Fire, it didn't used to have anything to do with the windows, and the Fire kind of ran rampant with that for a couple of years when they found some way to get guys green cards very quickly. And then the rules adapted, and here we are. But I'm told that it's, if they want to sign a name, it's the lack of international slots not going to be what scuttles the deal.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, part of the reason I'm saying that is it is from like a lot of roster rule nerds who I think, everyone here kind of counts in that. Like, a lot of people that are not as in the weeds as we are, it's something that comes up every single time of like, how is this going to happen if this is the situation?
Dude, I got people posting about GAM that have never watched a game of soccer. Okay, that's the motion this has had. And look, maybe to get back to the topic at hand, right? As I've kind of diverted us a little bit. Curious from both of you, and we can kind of kick this around a little bit. But Fire sit third in the East right now, fifth on tiebreakers with Real Salt Lake for the overall Supporter Shield standings. I kind of look at this as something that it certainly has the potential to shake the East. Maybe the question is how much. Nashville sits pretty comfortably. They're 7 points ahead at the moment. Curious from your guys' perspective how much this changes the outlook, not just for the East, but as the Fire kind of sit just outside what we would call like that Supporter Shield race. I know Matt Doyle has been very vocal about like keep an eye on the Fire, right? Mm-hmm. They're within striking distance. And especially with Vancouver coming back, who knows who they'll be missing. Miami immediately after Vancouver for the Fire. If Messi makes it all the way to the World Cup final, I know that'll be after that game, but I doubt he'll be back right away. Mm-hmm. But who knows, right? Just curious your guys' thoughts on kind of where that sits and how this looks for the back half of 20 games, right?
So the East going into the summer for me had two really, really good teams. And then Chicago were kind of in their own tier because it's cool what New England have done, what the Red Bulls have done. I don't see them as serious postseason teams, like in terms of contending, and that's not any disrespect for a shot. Like I'm not belittling them because of the points they won. That's better than not winning the points. I just don't think that they're near those other teams, right? Right, Tim?
Marco's done a hell of a job with that squad, and I think that I was not expecting them to look nearly as good, and it's amazing they held it on. Yeah,
and that's the thing. Like, this is a positive, but when we're talking about postseason time comes, if the Revs, I don't know, what would it be? Whatever. If they play like Charlotte, I think I would even take Charlotte in that series. That's beside. Chicago, I think before this, like, they were clearly not Nashville, Miami, but they were better than the Revs, the Red Bulls, Charlotte, Cincy, and NYCFC. I think that this puts them very much the third team, but probably within that Nashville, Miami tier. Maybe we have to give it a little time to make sure that it looks what we think it's going to look like. But I think that it makes them even more of a serious contender come postseason. Supporter Shield, I think, is an interesting one. I don't know what you guys think, but I'm assuming that there's going to be some kinks to work out or some edges to smooth over a little bit as you integrate this player. And again, same thing with doing it with Cuypers, or if there's a move for Cuypers eventually that he departs, there is no real backup forward and they're not letting Cuypers go without some semblance of another forward coming in that maybe doesn't need to start every game, but if Lewandowski needs a week off or a couple weeks off, they're not going to feel like they're screwed.
Yeah, because that's been one sort of notable weak point, like just looking at the Flyers roster, looking at the way that they line up. I mean, it's been an obvious, that's why we've seen Robin Lod kind of like fill in there. Like he's played like, it feels like 11 outfield positions over the course of this year already, even though it hasn't quite been that many. I think that that's a pretty good assessment of it. I don't think that the Fire are really Supporters Shield contenders this year. I mean, it would be maybe not the craziest thing to have ever happened in MLS, but that's only because crazy things happen in MLS all the time.
Every week.
But I mean, like, look, right now they are 5 points behind Inter Miami with a game in hand. Like, Miami, everyone knows they're getting Casemiro. I think that there are questions about how some parts of that squad are going to be focused after the World Cup, and if that's going to hurt them, if it's going to help them. The coaching situation there's, whatever it is. But they've got Lionel Messi, and like, dude is just scoring goals. He's like walking on the pitch and just scoring a goal because he wants to, and so who knows? I do think though that in a knockout, like in MLS Cup, in Leagues Cup, it does potentially make them more of a serious contender to do some damage and get farther than I think they would have looked before. And the Fire have never qualified for CONCACAF in anything close to its modern format. And this, it's been kind of it's wild, but like they've never done it, right?
Yeah.
And
wow.
so
That's a good point.
Yeah, so you're looking at like, that's an obvious goal for the club, right? Like getting somewhere they haven't been before. Get Robert Lewandowski competing for continental trophies, just not the one that we associate him with. Right, and like it looked like the Open Cup was going to be the easiest path. They aren't in that anymore. So this would make them a real contender to get far enough in like the Leagues Cup where they could potentially get one of those slots, or finish high enough where between that and the Leagues Cup and different finishes they can wind up with a CONCACAF slot for next season, which it's a stated goal of the club. I asked Greg on the record what the timeline is, like if it's a goal for this season. He's like, I'm not putting a timeline on it, and that's totally fair. I get it, like he doesn't want to look like he's wrong about it, but he's gunning for as soon as possible, obviously.
Exactly, and that is a good point too. And I think this year there was 10 MLS teams in the Champions Cup, and it'll be a similar number next year. It just depends on Leagues Cup for that, to kind of those extra slots. MLS, I think, have gotten all of the Leagues Cup, Champions Cup berths over the last couple of years since it expanded to where it is, which is interesting. So, again, either way, like there is more room in this kind of expanded tournament, or at least more bids to MLS clubs to get into that tournament. That, again, if Chicago finished, I feel very good about them being top 3 in the East. We'll see exactly what that shakes out to be in the Supporters Shield race. But if you're in that like 3 to 6 range, then you should feel pretty good that you're going to end up in Champions Cup, because there's going to be overlap, like you said, from the teams that win trophies or the teams that finish higher up, and you keep going down, and a lot of teams make it now, which is cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And again, like it would just be something new for the team, new for the fan base. And, everyone loves Greg is genuinely excited about the idea of like playing games against Mexican teams. Like he loves that part of the Leagues Cup because he hasn't experienced it before. And he's excited about the idea of going down to Mexico. And like, this is just like one of those absolutely genuine things. It's like, it's not just him saying it. It's not a bit. It's not like an on the record thing. Like this is like, it's very much something that he wants to be doing.
Yeah, and I love that, and how like seriously the coaches and teams, like even like Miami, I know that they flamed out pretty early at the hands of Nashville, but like they won MLS Cup, and as the confetti's falling, they're saying we want to win Champions Cup. So it's cool to see that tournament getting taken more and more seriously as the years have gone on.
Does Greg Berhalter have fond memories playing against Mexican teams? I'm trying to dig that one out there. I don't know if I remember that. No, I'm curious. Like we talked about all the things that this team could do, right? And I think one change that hasn't really been honed in on yet, and maybe we'll continue to unpack as the season folds along, is this does put kind of an immediate pressure that the club did not have before, right? Not only because Robert Lewandowski is 38 and essentially signed for 2 half seasons and 1 full season, with just the way the schedule shakes out with the change, but you're also asking, Andre Franco, who hasn't played more than 700 minutes since 2021-22, right, to play, at least 1,500 good minutes if you want to go for, a deep playoff run, right, with 20 games remaining plus whatever they may have, plus Leagues Cup. And the looming question of Hugo Cuypers, Jonathan Bombo, what is that DP slot? It does feel like this is a new added pressure to a team that was kind of, it felt like in the preseason, everybody's favorite. Ooh, keep an eye out. Like, let's see what this team can do. They'll be fun to watch. It does feel like this pretty strongly changes the tone, if for no other reason than, frankly, Tom, this is the first time we've gotten you here. You know what I mean? Not that we've even like chasing you down necessarily, but does have more of a national eye on it.
No, and that's a good way to put it too. Of like, so last year it was, even when things weren't like great, like all it was, hey, this is the first year of Berhalter. It's going to take a little time. This is a transitional year. It was a lot of positivity and optimism, which was earned, and which, again, by the end of the season, they're rolling. Things look really good. Like that still ended up being a wild card team, right? And that was still a big step forward from what had previously happened at this club. So, but like still, like wild card isn't a terribly steep bar. And this year, it was like you said, everybody's watched this team, kind of a dark horse. Hey, they're going to be active in the summer. Hey, they tried for Neymar, they tried for Salah. They're really in for Lewandowski. Like, let's kind of see what happens. Well, now he's here. Once he signs, of course, we're not going to be talking about hypotheticals. And we're going to be looking at this team that over 18 months since Greg Berhalter joined, basically the team, if it's not completely renewed, they had the opportunity to move on from other guys, right? Like, so this is absolutely Greg Berhalter's team. And with that comes expectations. You can't say, we need more time, when you've brought in a whole number of key players and you've kept a couple that you re-signed, like you could have moved on from. So it's not the excuse that sometimes, like when you walk into a new team and they're, long-term contracts that you just can't do anything about, or you can do your best to try to get out of them, but it's going to take a few windows. Like, and I think that's another positive thing for this team. Like, they've overturned the roster and gotten the style keyed down so very fast that expectations are going to rise.
Yeah, and I think the other kind of unique thing about this is just in terms of relevance, like we haven't talked a ton about the off the pitch stuff, which is obviously going to be huge, but the Fire have just about like 2 years left, like almost, within a couple of weeks of now to when they're opening their new building, which is going to be much smaller. That's obviously the size that they want to be playing in. They think that that'll be the best long term for the club and getting the atmosphere and the culture and all that right. But it also gives 2 years for the Fire to kind of become a cultural phenomenon in Chicago, like in the market, in a way that they really haven't been in a long time. And like Lewandowski is going to get interest from that huge, Polish community in Chicago. But, if people come and they don't see a winner, like I think you do have to question if they're going to be as moved to come back as they were before, right? Because Soldier Field has serious issues as a venue for MLS, just in terms of the ambiance, in terms of the amenities and all that stuff, right? And so it's about capitalizing on that and giving people trophies and championships in that time between now and when the building opens, which I thought was going to be the goal of, like, you open the building, you win MLS Cup. And now I think that it's, not going to be a disappointment necessarily if that doesn't happen before the building opens, but it certainly feels like there's some pressure on it, right?
Pressure for at least big games of consequence. And I think that this team is set up for that, right? Like, we'll go back to what we were saying 10 minutes ago about where does this team sit in the hierarchy of both the East and the league. Tim, your point about the stadium is a salient one, and one that is very fitting here. Even if they weren't going into a new stadium, we'd probably all be saying the same things of like, okay, like to re-energize Chicago, which has started to happen under Greg Berhalter. But to really re-energize it, okay, like you need to have big games of consequence, whether it's this season, it's going to be playoff games, because as much as we all will watch the Leagues Cup, listen, if they get to a semifinal of the Leagues Cup, but then are bounced in the first round of the playoffs, that ain't a good season, right? So as long as, like, if they advance in the playoffs and there's some special moments and you think of Soldier Field in the fall, and it's going to, the pitch is going to look like pale, because that's what it looks like at that time of year. People are going to look cold in the stands, but there's going to be people in the stands, and it's going to be one of those like proper like playoff atmospheres and playoff environments, and just even in terms of the weather and everything, that obviously we're going to need to recalibrate what we think proper playoff weather is.
I was going to say it's the last time it's going to be like that ever, which is wild.
Maybe that's why I'm rooting for Chicago to host some big playoff games in the cold. But it sounds silly to even like put the pressure up of like, clock's ticking, like Lewandowski, like hopefully by the time people are listening to this, he's literally signed, but when we're recording, he hasn't literally signed the contract. Like maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but like, I know that internally that's what they want. They live for this pressure. They live for these expectations. They'd rather have the expectations than just be like, oh shucks, I hope we get to a wild card game and everybody will pat us on the head. No, they want this. They want to be a big club and challenging at the top.
Yeah. And when you think about the impact that different, huge name DPs have had coming in to MLS. Like, some have obviously just not really been successful at all. But of those that have had, like, been effective on the pitch, I think that, like, you look at Zlatan maybe a little bit differently than you do a lot of other players that have been as good and had that kind of impact, just because the team did not win trophies when Zlatan was there. Like, they got better. He was really fun to watch. He was great on late night, but, you know, not winning any hardware, I think, changes the conversation around what he did. And it changes the way that I think some of the fans, from talking to LA Galaxy fans, like, that they looked at his time here versus remembering a trophy hoist.
They didn't have any real games of consequence. What was it, Zlatan's last game when they lost in the playoffs to LAFC? Like, his debut, like, that was a real thing. Bro, that was still a March MLS game or whenever it was, right? Like, it was an iconic moment in the league's history. But I think we all from that day was like, all right, like, LAFC are kind of like one of the best teams in the league right now. And all right, the Galaxy are back and this will be fun. And they got one playoff game. Like, they beat a bad Minnesota team in the first round to set up a game against LAFC. I forget if that finished 5-3 or 5-2, but there was never a point where I was like, oh, the Galaxy are going to win here.
You know, I think maybe the point we're driving home here is he can't be the moment. He needs to be part of the moment, right? You want him to maybe deliver the moment, but if it's just, oh, Robert Lewandowski scored a goal, that might end up looking back and being a little disappointed, right? Like, you know, in all seriousness, you look back at a guy like Brian Gutierrez and, like, for all the failures of his time here, not him specifically, but the organization around him, like, he's remembered as that last game against Orlando, right? The goal he scored, like that win, right? And I don't think that's nothing. The ability to have some big games on the resume, especially with, I mean, you've got a shot at 3 trophies in 2 seasons for Robert Lewandowski, which is kind of a weird quirk, but it's just the way it works out, right? Three league trophies, I should say, right? Not even counting Supporter Shield and Leagues Cup and Open Cup and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Should be good for the
MLS Cup that we all will definitely remember as being as important as the other MLS Cups.
It depends on who wins it, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
no,
look,
it's one of those things. If your team wins it, it will absolutely count. It's like the way that everyone counts MLS Cup in 2020, but like FC Cincinnati people will tell you that wooden spoon doesn't count.
But it's a good way to put it.
Oh, God. Lordy. Awesome. Well, fellas, I this feels like as normal a place as any to wrap up. To listeners, thank you for being here. Tom, thanks for joining, man. I'm sure people know, but if you'd like to tell them where to find you, please, give us the spiel.
Yeah, social media at Tom Bogert, The Athletic, and SoccerWise. I haven't been on a SoccerWise show in a little bit because I've been out at the World Cup, so that's sad. But I love being with the boys and look forward to getting back.
Yeah, you're really roughing it there, covering the World Cup.
So sorry you have to be out there covering the World Cup.
Do you think they're thinking about me the way I'm thinking about them? Because I bet they're not. Been replaced very quickly.
You know that there's a part of their heart that there's a part of Goss's heart that is just longing for you every time you're out there.
Usually he calls me when we don't talk for a little while. He hasn't yet, so I need to maybe after this podcast.
He's learning to respect boundaries. Like, that's part of maturing in a relationship.
Just give him a little shout. Just give him a little shout. Just like, hey, buddy. Just maybe a text.
Angry voice note.
Yeah. was thinking about you. I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm an idiot.
I haven't heard from you in a while. Anyways, hope you're okay.
Hope you're okay.
Crazy how South Africa will let that one slip away. I don't want to let you slip away, but
with the future meme.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, folks, Tom Bogert of The Athletic and SoccerWise. Tom, we'll have you back when Mbokazi sells for $75 million to Nottingham Forest. That'll be a lot of fun.
Looking forward to it.
It's great to be back. Thank you so much for tuning in to listen. We'll have some more regular programming coming back as the season starts to warm up again, as the Fires start making moves, and hopefully with a couple other names in tow that we get to have some fun breaking down. Tim, anything you want to add before we run out of here? I feel like I don't know why. I don't ever ask you, but today I'm going to ask.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this is the first time this has ever come up. You're normally like, yeah, we're done.
I'm just trying. Tom is reminding us how important it is to check in on our friends. So I just want to check in, make sure you're good before we wrap here.
Appreciate that.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can stay tuned to menofred97.com. It's where you'll find all the latest news and happenings on all things Chicago Fire. Stay tuned on socials, menofred97, anywhere and everywhere that matters. And as always, wherever you're listening, if you could give us a like, a share, a subscribe, all that kind of fun stuff, it goes a long way. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm John for Tim, for Tom Bogert, and for our illustrious producer, Austin. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire, and come on, you men in red.